I'm Rachel Mitchell, 32, and I never thought I'd see my father again after he walked out on my high school graduation day. For 14 years, not a birthday call, not a Christmas card, complete radio silence. Then, as I stood beside my mother's casket, a familiar voice cut through the funeral parlor. My father, older but unmistakable, approaching with rehearsed sympathy and designer shoes that probably cost more than Mom's medical bills. "Rachel, honey," he said, reaching for my hand. "Your mother would have wanted me to help you through this." His other hand was already out, palm up. If you've ever experienced that gut-wrenching moment when someone who hurt you deeply suddenly reappears at your most vulnerable moment, you know exactly what I felt. Before I continue this family drama that still feels surreal even now, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever had to deal with a family member who only shows up when they want something. Trust me, what happened next in this funeral parlor is something you won't want to miss. To understand how shocking my father's reappearance was, you need to know our history. My early childhood memories are actually pretty good. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood in Ohio. Dad worked in pharmaceutical sales. Mom was a dedicated nurse at the local hospital. We weren't rich, but we had enough for yearly vacations to the lake and Christmas mornings, with presents under the tree. My father, Daniel Mitchell, was the charismatic parent. He'd walk into a room and instantly become the center of attention with his loud laugh and endless stories. People gravitated toward him, including me. When I was little, I thought he hung the moon. He'd pick me up from school in his company car, music blasting, and we'd get ice cream before heading home. He called me his princess and promised I'd go to any college I wanted because he was going to make it big any day now. Mom, Sarah, was the steady one. While Dad charmed, Mom anchored. She worked the night shift at the hospital 3 times a week so she could be home when I got back from school the other days. She helped with homework, attended every parent-teacher conference, and somehow managed to keep our household running despite Dad's unpredictable schedule. The first cracks appeared when I was around 12. Dad lost his job. He said his boss was jealous of his success and had it out for him. But Mom's tight expression told a different story. He was unemployed for 3 months, during which our family dynamic shifted dramatically. Mom picked up extra shifts. Dad spent days in front of the computer claiming to be job hunting, but I'd catch him playing online poker when I got home from school. The fighting started small, whispered arguments in the kitchen that stopped when I entered the room. Then they escalated to closed-door shouting matches that no amount of pillows over my head could block out. Money became the central theme of every fight. Where was it going? Why wasn't there enough? Who spent what? Dad eventually found another sales position. But something fundamental had changed. He started disappearing for days at a time on business trips that his company supposedly required. He'd return with a gift for me, a new CD player, designer jeans, things we couldn't really afford, but no money for the bills piling up on the kitchen counter. I remember finding Mom at the kitchen table late one night, calculator in hand, bills spread out before her, silently crying. When she saw me, she quickly wiped her eyes and forced a smile. "Just adult stuff, Rach. Nothing for you to worry about." But at 14, I wasn't a little kid anymore. I knew we were in trouble. The divorce came when I was 16, after Dad disappeared for 2 weeks without calling. Mom finally had enough when he returned acting like nothing had happened. The custody battle was ugly, not because Dad particularly wanted me living with him, but because he seemed determined to hurt Mom in any way possible. He demanded the house, the car, even Mom's family heirlooms that had nothing to do with him. Through it all, he promised me nothing would change between us. "You're my princess, Rach," he'd say, taking me for lunch at expensive restaurants he couldn't afford. "This is between your mom and me. You'll always be my little girl." I tried so hard to maintain relationships with both parents despite being caught in the crossfire. I'd spend weekends at Dad's sad little apartment, where he'd order takeout and talk about all the ways Mom had ruined his life. Then I'd come home to Mom, who never said a bad word about him in front of me, but whose eyes told the whole story. By senior year, I had become Mom's unofficial emotional support. I got a part-time job at the local grocery store to help with expenses. I maintained straight, as because I knew college scholarships would be our only way forward. I grew up fast, watching Mom work double shifts to keep our now smaller house after the divorce settlement left her with most of Dad's debts, but few of the assets. "You shouldn't have to be so responsible at your age," Mom would say, exhaustion lining her face. "I'm sorry, Rachel, but I wasn't sorry. I was angry at my father for putting us in this position, for making promises he never kept, for making Mom cry when he thought I couldn't hear. Still, some childish part of me held on to hope that he would come through in the end, that he actually meant it when he said he'd help with college, that he still wanted to be my dad. That hope was about to be shattered completely. My high school graduation fell on a perfect June day. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m., and Mom had taken the entire day off to help me get ready. She'd even splurged on a new dress for herself, a pretty blue number that matched her eyes. "Your dad said he'll meet us there," Mom told me as she pinned my cap in place. Her voice was carefully neutral. "He's got something special planned for after." I nodded, excitement and anxiety battling in my stomach. Dad had been increasingly unreliable with his visitation schedule over the past few months, but surely he wouldn't miss graduation. He'd been talking about this day since I was little, promising a big surprise to launch me into my college years. The ceremony venue filled with proud families. I scanned the audience repeatedly during the processional, looking for Dad's face, his distinctive wave. He wasn't there. I kept checking my phone whenever I could sneak a glance. Nothing. When they called my name to receive my diploma, I heard Mom's enthusiastic cheering. She was standing, clapping wildly, tears streaming down her face. The seat beside her remained empty. After the ceremony, Mom hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you, honey. So proud." I checked my phone again. Finally, a text from Dad. "Emergency business opportunity in California. We'll make it up to you, big time. This is the break I've been waiting for. We'll call later with college dollar details." So proud, Princess. I showed Mom the text, my throat tight with disappointment. "Oh, Rachel," she squeezed my hand. "Let's not let this ruin your day. I've got a little party planned at home." Mom had decorated our small backyard with streamers and balloons. She'd invited a few relatives and my closest friends. She'd ordered my favorite cake and even put together a scrapbook of my school years as a gift. It was perfect, except for the dad-sized hole in the celebration. Days turned into weeks with only sporadic texts from Dad, each one promising he'd call tomorrow to discuss his big contribution to my college fund. Tomorrow never came. Then, while scrolling through social media one July evening, I saw it. A mutual friend had been tagged in a photo taken in Los Angeles. There was my dad, tanned and grinning, with his arm around a woman who couldn't have been more than 25. The caption read, "Welcome to LA, Dan. Kayla's a lucky girl." I showed Mom, who sighed deeply. "I was afraid of something like this. Rachel, I need to tell you something. Your father stopped paying child support 3 months ago. His last alimony check bounced. I've been trying to handle it without worrying you, but—" She gestured helplessly. "I've filed the paperwork, but who knows if we'll ever see that money." The reality hit me like a physical blow. Dad hadn't experienced a sudden business emergency. He'd chosen to abandon us, to abandon me completely. He'd moved across the country with a girlfriend nearly young enough to be his daughter, without even saying goodbye. My carefully laid college plans imploded overnight. The state university that had accepted me was now financially out of reach without the contribution Dad had promised. Instead, I enrolled in community college while continuing to work at the grocery store. Mom took on even more hospital shifts, coming home with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. My 19th birthday came in November. Dad sent a text. "Happy birthday, Princess. Things crazy busy here. We'll call soon." It was the last communication I received from him for 13 years. Those first few months, I tried reaching him repeatedly. Calls went straight to voicemail. Texts received brief, vague replies that eventually stopped altogether. Emails bounced back. His social media accounts were either deleted or set to private. It was as if Daniel Mitchell had decided to erase his old life entirely, including his only child. The abandonment broke something in me. I fell into a depression that first year, questioning what I had done wrong, why I wasn't enough for him to stay. I developed trust issues that sabotaged my early attempts at dating. I had nightmares where I was searching for someone who kept disappearing around corners. Mom suggested therapy, which we could barely afford, but she insisted it was important. "You can't carry this weight into your future, Rachel," she said. "Your father's choices are about him, not you. Never you." Eventually, I stopped trying to reach him. I stopped checking social media for glimpses of his new life. I stopped hoping he'd remember I existed. I accepted that, for all intents and purposes, I no longer had a father. Little did I know that 13 years later, he would suddenly decide to remember me at the worst possible moment, for the worst possible reasons. Community college wasn't part of my original plan, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I excelled in my marketing classes, and my part-time job at the grocery store evolved into a position in their corporate office, handling local advertising. By my second year, I had saved enough to transfer to the state university for my final 2 years. It was there I met Marcus Thompson. Tall, thoughtful, with kind eyes and a quiet confidence, he was everything my father wasn't. We met in a marketing ethics class, became study partners, and gradually, something more. Our first date wasn't at some flashy restaurant. It was a picnic in the park where we talked until sunset. What struck me most about Marcus was his reliability. If he said he would call at 7, my phone rang at 7. If he promised to show up, he showed up. These might seem like basic expectations, but for someone whose father had shattered all promises, Marcus's consistency was healing. Mom adored him from the first time I brought him home. "He looks at you like you hang the moon, Rachel," she said after he left. "Hold on to that one." Through it all, Mom remained my rock. Despite her exhaustion from hospital shifts, she always found time to ask about my classes, to celebrate my small victories, to comfort me through setbacks. She had started putting aside a little money each month for my graduation gift, skipping lunches out and cutting back on everything but essentials. When I graduated with my marketing degree, Mom sat in the audience beaming, having taken a rare full weekend off work. The seat beside her wasn't empty this time. Marcus was there, cheering loudly when my name was called. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm in Columbus. Marcus and I moved in together, a small apartment halfway between my job and his position as an accountant at a local firm. We worked hard, saved carefully, and built a life step by steady step. When Marcus proposed 2 years later, there was only one shadow on my happiness. Who would walk me down the aisle? The traditional father-daughter dance, the father's speech, all those wedding moments were impossible dreams for me. "I've been thinking," Mom said when I shared these concerns. "I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle, Rachel. I've been with you every step of the way. Why stop now?" Our wedding was modest but perfect. Mom, radiant in deep purple, proudly walked me toward Marcus. During the reception, instead of a father-daughter dance, Mom and I shared a special moment on the dance floor that left few dry eyes in the venue. Marcus's father, a kind man who had welcomed me like a daughter, gave a touching speech that managed to fill the void my own father had left. Through therapy and Mom's unwavering support, I had worked through much of my abandonment trauma. I still had moments, particularly around Father's Day, or when seeing fathers with their daughters when the pain would resurface. But I had built a chosen family of friends and in-laws who showed me what unconditional love actually looked like. Marcus and I saved for 3 years to buy our first home, a charming 3-bedroom in a family-friendly neighborhood. The day we got our keys, Mom brought a housewarming gift, a handmade quilt she'd been secretly working on for months. "I'm so proud of you, Rachel," she said, looking around our new home. "You've built this beautiful life despite everything, not because of anything he did, but because of who you are." My career advanced steadily. I moved to a larger agency, then was headhunted by a national firm with better benefits and growth potential. Marcus's accounting practice expanded. We started discussing children, agreeing to start trying after our 5th anniversary. Through holidays, birthdays, and life milestones, we created new traditions that filled our home with laughter and love. Mom was a constant presence, coming over for Sunday dinners, joining us for weekend getaways, becoming as much a best friend as a mother. "I never want you to feel like you missed out on family, Rachel," Mom told me once over coffee. "Family isn't just blood, it's who shows up, who stays, who loves without conditions." As my 30s approached, I realized I had achieved something remarkable. I had broken the cycle. The insecure, heartbroken teenager who questioned her own worth had become a confident woman surrounded by genuine love. I had built a life with no empty chairs at my table, no missing pieces in my heart. I thought, finally moved beyond my father's shadow. I was wrong. The call came on an ordinary Tuesday. I was between meetings when Mom's number flashed on my phone. Something in her voice immediately set off alarm bells. "The doctor found something," she said, trying to sound casual. "Probably nothing, but they want to do some more tests." Those more tests led to a devastating diagnosis: aggressive pancreatic cancer, already at stage 3. At only 58, my vibrant, hard-working mother was facing a battle with one of the deadliest forms of cancer. "What do you need from me?" I asked, holding back tears as we sat in the oncologist's office reviewing treatment options. "Just be you," she answered, squeezing my hand. "That's always been enough." I immediately scaled back my work hours, using accumulated vacation time and the Family Medical Leave Act to be available for Mom's appointments. Marcus rearranged his schedule to cover when I couldn't. Our plans for starting a family were put on indefinite hold. Despite good insurance, the medical bills mounted quickly. Specialized treatments, medications not fully covered, home health equipment. The financial burden grew alongside our emotional one. Marcus and I dipped into our savings without hesitation, but I couldn't help wondering where my father was during all this. The man who had once promised to take care of us was nowhere to be found when we actually needed help. For 8 months, we rode the terrible roller coaster of cancer treatment. Brief periods of hope when a treatment seemed to work, followed by crushing setbacks when scans showed continued spread. Through it all, Mom maintained her dignity and even her humor. "Well, at least I don't have to worry about retirement planning anymore," she joked one day. Then, seeing my face, added, "Too soon?" As she grew weaker, I moved a bed into our guest room so she could stay with us. Marcus and I took turns administering medications, helping with basic needs, and just sitting with her. We became experts in pain management, in reading subtle changes in her condition, in finding small joys in increasingly difficult days. During one lucid period, Mom asked me to help her sort through some paperwork. "There's not much," she said, "but I want to make sure you don't have additional burdens when—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but I understood. Together we organized her modest accounts, insurance policies, and property documents. I was touched to discover she had maintained a small life insurance policy specifically to cover funeral expenses. Even facing death, she was thinking of ways to care for me. As hospice care began, our conversations took on new depth. During one particularly clear evening, Mom brought up a subject we rarely discussed. "I want you to know," she said, her voice thin but determined, "I never regretted a day with your father, because he gave me you." I blinked back tears. "How can you say that after everything he did?" She smiled faintly. "Love is complicated, Rachel. I'm not excusing what he did to us, but hatred is a heavy thing to carry. I let mine go years ago." "I haven't seen or heard from him in 13 years, Mom," I said. "He didn't even care enough to find out if we were okay." "I know." She paused, gathering strength. "Can I ask you for something difficult?" "Anything. If he ever comes back into your life, try to find some forgiveness. Not for his sake, but for yours. Carrying that anger hurts you more than it hurts him." I couldn't promise that, but I couldn't deny her either. "I'll try," I whispered, knowing it was probably a moot point anyway. My father was long gone. In her final weeks, Mom drifted in and out of consciousness. I read to her from her favorite books, played the music she loved, and held her hand for hours. Marcus would bring dinner and sit with us, sometimes gently massaging her increasingly frail hands. "You found a good one," she whispered to me one evening after Marcus had stepped out. "I can go knowing you're not alone." "I'm not ready for you to go at all," I admitted, tears flowing freely. "I know, sweetheart. But you're stronger than you know. You always have been." On a quiet Saturday morning, with me holding one hand and Marcus the other, Mom took her last peaceful breath. The room felt suddenly empty, as if all the light had been pulled from it in an instant. I was officially an orphan. My father had abandoned me by choice, and now my mother had been taken by cancer. The grief was overwhelming, consuming me in waves that left me gasping for air. The following days passed in a blur. Funeral arrangements, death certificates, notifying friends and family, all while trying to process the enormous hole Mom's absence had left in my life. Marcus handled what he could, but some tasks only I could do. Going through Mom's apartment was the hardest. Each object held memories: the well-worn cookbook where she'd penciled notes in the margins, her collection of nurses' watches spanning her career, photo albums meticulously organized by year. In her bedroom closet, I found a shoebox I'd never seen before. Inside were photos of my father and her from happier times, along with a bundle of old letters tied with a faded ribbon. I couldn't bring myself to read them, but I couldn't throw them away either. Something about their existence, evidence that she had truly loved him, once made me feel connected to a part of my history I'd tried to forget. Among her organized papers was a folder marked funeral, containing not just her insurance policy, but detailed preferences for her service, favorite readings, even music selections. She had thought of everything, trying to ease my burden even in death. What I didn't know was that the funeral she had so carefully planned would become the setting for the most unexpected and unwelcome reunion of my life. If you've ever lost someone who was your entire support system, you know that the grief comes in waves that threaten to pull you under completely. I was drowning in those waves when I walked into the funeral home for Mom's service. Before I continue with what happened next, take a second to hit that like button if you've ever had to be the strong one even when you felt like falling apart. And if you're watching this while dealing with your own grief, know that you're not alone. The next part of this story shows exactly how complicated family dynamics can get in our most vulnerable moments. The funeral home was filled with Mom's colleagues from the hospital, neighbors, friends, and the extended family members who had stood by us after Dad left. The service was scheduled for 11 a.m., and Marcus and I arrived early to greet people and make final arrangements. Mom looked peaceful in her casket, wearing the blue dress she had worn to our wedding. I had selected her favorite necklace, a simple silver pendant I had given her for her 50th birthday. Her hands were folded over a small bouquet of daisies, her favorite flower. People began arriving, offering condolences, sharing stories about Mom that made me smile through tears. Marcus stayed close, his hand a steady presence on my back, stepping away only occasionally to help elderly guests to their seats or handle questions from the funeral director. The service was halfway through, the celebrant sharing stories of Mom's dedication to her patients and her community, when I felt a strange shift in the room's energy. A murmur rippled through the back rows. I turned slightly, and my heart stopped. Standing in the doorway, looking older but unmistakable, was my father. The years had added silver to his temples and lines around his eyes, but his posture, slightly leaning forward as if perpetually eager to charm, was exactly as I remembered. Beside him stood a slender blonde woman, who couldn't have been much older than 30, dressed inappropriately fashionably for a funeral, in a tight black dress and designer heels. Dad caught my eye and had the audacity to give me a small, sad smile, as if we were sharing this grief equally, as if he had any right to grief at all. Marcus followed my gaze, his body tensing beside me. "Is that?" he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. Dad and his companion slipped into seats at the very back. I forced myself to turn away, to focus on the celebrant's words, on the memories of Mom being shared. This was her day, her farewell. I wouldn't let him taint it. After the formal service, there was a receiving line where I stood accepting condolences. I saw Dad hanging back, watching, clearly waiting for his moment. When most people had passed through, he approached the blonde woman trailing slightly behind him. "Rachel," he said, his voice exactly as I remembered. "I'm so sorry about your mother. She was a wonderful woman." The casual way he spoke of Mom, as if he had any recent knowledge of her life, sent a surge of anger through me that I struggled to control. "Thank you for coming," I replied stiffly, the social autopilot of grief carrying me through. "This is my wife, Tiffany," he said, pulling the blonde woman forward. "Tiffany, this is my daughter, Rachel." Tiffany smiled uncertainly. "I'm sorry for your loss. Your father has told me so much about you." I highly doubted that, but nodded anyway. "Rachel, honey," Dad continued, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "when things settle down, I'd really like us to talk. I want to make things right between us. I should be there for you now, especially with this happening." His eyes darted around the room, taking in the guests, many of whom were staring openly at this unexpected reunion. I noticed him particularly studying Marcus, perhaps gauging his status by his well-tailored suit. "This isn't the time or place," I managed, grateful when Marcus slid his arm protectively around my waist. Of course, Dad agreed quickly. "But there are some financial matters we should discuss soon. Family inheritance issues, you know." I didn't know, actually. Mom had been transparent about her modest assets and had everything clearly documented. "I'm Marcus Thompson, Rachel's husband," Marcus interjected, extending his hand with perfect politeness while his eyes remained cold. "I don't believe we've met." "Daniel Mitchell," my father replied, shaking Marcus's hand with his trademark firm grip and eye contact. "Rachel's father. I've been away on business for quite some time." Business. 14 years of abandonment reduced to away on business. Throughout the reception that followed at our home, I kept catching glimpses of Dad networking with my friends and colleagues, exchanging business cards, that familiar animated expression as he regaled someone with a story. Tiffany stayed by the food table, looking bored and checking her phone frequently. At one point, I overheard Dad talking to one of my more successful friends from the marketing agency. "Thinking about some family business opportunities," he was saying. "Rachel's got such a good head on her shoulders. Gets that from me, you know." Just before leaving, Dad approached me again. "Rachel, I'm staying at the Marriott downtown for a few days. Room 714. I'll call you tomorrow. We really need to discuss what your mother would have wanted." He pressed a business card into my hand. "My new cell is on there." The card read Mitchell Consulting LLC with a Los Angeles address and a website I'd never heard of. "I'm so glad we're reconnected, Princess," he said, attempting to hug me. I remained rigid in his embrace. "Tomorrow, okay? It's time we were a family again." After he and Tiffany left, I collapsed onto the couch, emotionally drained. Marcus sat beside me, taking my hands in his. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I don't know," I admitted. I never thought I'd see him again. And now, today, of all days, I looked down at the business card still clutched in my hand. What could he possibly want after all this time? "Money?" Marcus said flatly. "Did you notice his watch? It's a knockoff. His shoes are expensive but worn, and that wife looks like she has expensive tastes." "He mentioned inheritance," I said. "But Mom didn't have much to leave. Just the life insurance for the funeral and a small retirement account. Everything was clearly designated in her will." Marcus looked troubled. "Just be careful, Rach. The timing of his reappearance doesn't feel coincidental." That night, after everyone had gone and the house was finally quiet, I broke down completely. I cried for Mom, for the years she wouldn't see, for the grandchildren she'd never meet. And yes, I cried for the father I had lost long before he physically disappeared, for the relationship that would never be repaired, for the little girl who once thought her daddy hung the moon. I lay awake most of the night, Marcus sleeping fitfully beside me, wondering what tomorrow's meeting would bring. Part of me wanted to ignore Dad's call, to continue as if he hadn't reappeared. But another part, perhaps the part that had never fully stopped being that abandoned teenager, needed closure. Mom's final request echoed in my mind. "If he ever comes back into your life, try to find some forgiveness." I wasn't sure forgiveness was possible, but perhaps understanding was. Perhaps tomorrow I would finally learn why my father had found it so easy to walk away and forget I existed for 14 years, only to suddenly remember when my mother died. I had no idea that the truth would be even more painful than the abandonment itself. Dad called at 9 a.m. the next morning, suggesting we meet for coffee at 11 at a cafe downtown. His voice was cheerful, as if we were old friends catching up, rather than estranged family reuniting under the shadow of my mother's death. "I'll be there," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Marcus offered to come with me, but this was something I needed to do alone. The cafe was upscale, with expensive espresso drinks and artisanal pastries. Dad was already seated at a corner table when I arrived, dressed in a button-down shirt that looked new but had a department store tag hastily removed, leaving a small thread at the collar. He stood when he saw me, arms open for a hug I didn't reciprocate. "Rachel, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "I've ordered you a caramel latte. You still like those, right?" The fact that he remembered my coffee preference from my teenage years struck me as both touching and manipulative. "Actually, I drink black coffee now," I replied, but sat down anyway. Dad settled back in his chair, studying me with what appeared to be genuine affection. "You look just like your mother," he said. "She was always beautiful." I didn't want to discuss Mom with him. "What did you want to talk about?" He sighed, adopting a serious expression. "First, I want to say how sorry I am for how things ended between us. I never meant to lose touch for so long." "Lose touch?" I repeated incredulously. "You abandoned me and Mom. You moved across the country without saying goodbye. You stopped paying child support. That's not losing touch, Dad." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "It wasn't my finest moment, I admit. But Rachel, you have to understand the divorce was so bitter. Your mother was." He paused, apparently reconsidering his words. I felt pushed out. And the opportunity in California came up so suddenly. I thought I'd get established, then send for you to visit. But time got away from me. 14 years got away from you? He spread his hands in a helpless gesture. Life gets complicated. I remarried, started a new business. Before I knew it, years had passed. I figured you'd moved on, maybe didn't want to hear from me. "You could have tried," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. "You're right," he conceded. "I should have. But I'm here now, and I want us to start fresh. Family is everything, Rachel. I've realized that more and more as I've gotten older." Something about the practiced quality of his speech made me uneasy. This felt rehearsed, as if he'd practiced these lines in the mirror before meeting me. "Let's talk about your mother's estate," he continued, his tone shifting subtly. "I know this is difficult timing, but these matters are best handled promptly." "What about it?" I asked. Everything was in order. Mom was very organized. "Yes, Sarah was always efficient," he said with a small smile. "But as her former husband, I might have certain claims to consider. We were married for 16 years after all." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. "You think Mom left money?" Dad looked slightly offended. "It's not about money, Rachel. It's about what's right, what's fair." "Fair?" I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you left us with nothing? When Mom had to work double shifts to keep our house? When I had to give up my college plans because you disappeared?" He had the audacity to look wounded. "I've had my own struggles, Rachel. Not everything has gone smoothly for me either." "What struggles exactly?" I asked. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "The business world can be brutal. I've had some investments not pan out as expected. The economy hasn't been kind to entrepreneurs like me." "What exactly is Mitchell Consulting?" I asked. "Various business development services," he replied vaguely. "Anyway, I'm not here to discuss my business challenges. I'm here because I want to reconnect with my daughter and discuss any inheritance matters that need resolution." I decided to be direct. "Dad, are you in financial trouble?" His eyes flickered away briefly. "I've had some temporary setbacks. Nothing serious." "How temporary?" He sighed, finally dropping some of the facade. "Look, I've had some issues with creditors. Made some investments that didn't pan out. Tiffany's expensive tastes don't help. I thought perhaps. Well, I assumed Sarah would have had a substantial life insurance policy. She was always practical that way. And you thought you were entitled to some of it? I couldn't keep the disgust from my voice. Not entitled, he corrected quickly. But as her former husband and your father, I thought perhaps she might have made provisions. Or that you might want to help family in need. Help family? I repeated. The way you helped us when you left? That's water under the bridge, he said dismissively. We're talking about now. I need about 50,000 to clear some debts and get back on my feet. It's not much in the grand scheme of things. $50,000? I was stunned by his audacity. It's a loan, not a gift, he clarified. I'll pay it back once my new ventures take off. And it would give us a chance to rebuild our relationship. I've missed you, princess. The old nickname in his mouth made me feel physically ill. What if I said no? His expression hardened slightly. I'd hope you wouldn't. Family should help family. And technically, I might have some legal claims to consider regarding Sarah's estate. The divorce settlement had some ambiguities. Was he actually threatening legal action? Mom didn't have $50,000 to leave, Dad. She had just enough for her funeral and a small retirement account that's coming to me. That's it. He looked genuinely surprised, then skeptical. That can't be right. She was a nurse for decades. There must be more. She put me through college after you left. She helped us with the down payment on our house. She lived modestly and gave generously. That's who she was. Dad leaned back, reassessing. What about your situation? You seem to be doing well. Nice clothes, successful husband. I'm not giving you $50,000, I said firmly. Or any money. Not after everything you did or didn't do. He studied me for a long moment. I'm disappointed, Rachel. I thought you'd be more understanding of family needs. I need to go, I said, standing up. This was a mistake. Think about it, he urged. I'll be in town for a few more days. Family should stick together in difficult times. I left the cafe in a daze, tears of anger and disbelief blurring my vision. I called Marcus immediately, who suggested I come straight to his office rather than being alone. When I arrived, Marcus guided me to his private office and closed the door. I collapsed into a chair and told him everything. The nerve of that man, Marcus said when I finished. To show up after 14 years and ask for money? At your mother's funeral? I need to know more about him, I said. This can't be the first time he's done something like this. That evening, Marcus and I began researching. A simple Google search of Daniel Mitchell scam yielded surprising results. Forum posts from people claiming they'd invested in his consulting services only to lose their money. His business website was vague about actual services, but full of promises about wealth generation and family legacy planning. Most disturbing was an article from a small California newspaper about a lawsuit filed against him by his second ex-wife's parents, claiming he had manipulated them into investing in a non-existent business venture. Further digging revealed a pattern. Dad would reconnect with estranged relatives during vulnerable times, funerals, illnesses, divorces, and inevitably ask for loans that were never repaid. I even found a distant cousin's social media post warning family members about him. I also discovered through property records that he and Tiffany didn't own a home, but instead moved between rental properties every year or so, likely skipping out when rent became due. His claimed business address was actually a mail forwarding service. The next morning, I received a text from Dad. Thought more about our conversation? I really need your help, Rachel. Family first. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Mom's attorney to verify that Dad had no legal claims on her estate. He didn't. And to ask about protecting myself from any nuisance lawsuits he might file. Unlikely to succeed, but could be costly to defend. The most painful discovery came when I found Dad's current in-laws on social media. After much deliberation, I sent a private message to Tiffany's mother, introducing myself and asking if they were aware of Dad's financial history. Her response was illuminating. Rachel, we've been trying to get Tiffany away from him for 2 years. He's told her you died in a car accident as a teenager and that your mother was mentally unstable. He claimed to have no living family. We had no idea you existed until now. The depth of his deception was staggering. He hadn't just abandoned me. He had erased me from his narrative entirely, creating a fictional tragedy to avoid awkward questions about his past. When Dad called again the next day, I let it go to voicemail. His message was increasingly desperate. Rachel, I really need your help. Things are worse than I let on. Please, just 50,000 to get these guys off my back. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. The father I had once adored, who I thought hung the moon, was nothing but a con man who saw me as just another potential mark. The realization was both devastating and, strangely, freeing. As I gathered evidence of his pattern of behavior, I knew I needed to confront him one last time, not for his sake, but for mine. I needed closure that 14 years of absence hadn't provided. I needed to look him in the eye as an adult, not the abandoned teenager who still lingered in some corner of my heart. With Marcus's support, I began planning how to face my father on my terms, with my evidence, in a setting where I controlled the narrative. The time for being manipulated was over. You don't owe him anything, Marcus said as we sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by printouts of Dad's past schemes and legal troubles. You could just ignore him until he leaves town. I know, I replied. But this isn't just about him, it's about me. About finally standing up to him and getting closure. I contacted an estate attorney recommended by Mom's lawyer, explaining my unusual situation. The attorney, Elena Rodriguez, listened without judgment and offered practical advice. Your father has no legal claim on your mother's estate, she confirmed. The divorce settlement was finalized years ago, and he forfeited any claims by failing to fulfill his own obligations. However, people like your father often rely on intimidation and the cost of legal defense to get what they want. So what should I do? I asked. Confront him in a controlled environment where you have witnesses and documentation. My office is available if you'd like a neutral location. Sometimes just the setting of a law office is enough to discourage frivolous threats. While arranging this meeting, I made another significant discovery. In Mom's meticulous records, I found a folder labeled Child Support Documentation. Inside was a detailed accounting of every missed payment from Dad, with interest calculated according to state guidelines. The total amount he legally owed, $64,723. There was also a note in Mom's handwriting, never pursued for Rachel's sake. She deserves peace, not more conflict. Even in this, Mom had put my well-being first. The discovery brought fresh tears but also steeled my resolve. I also found Mom's old journal from the years right after Dad left. The entries detailed her struggle to keep our home, to support me emotionally while dealing with her own heartbreak, to rebuild a life he had shattered. One entry particularly struck me. Daniel called today asking for Rachel. When I put her on the phone, he promised her he'd send money for her textbooks. I know he won't. I'll have to pick up another shift to cover it. How do I protect her from the pain of his broken promises without making her resent him? She deserves a father who keeps his word. My research expanded to include relatives I hadn't spoken with in years. An aunt on Dad's side revealed he had approached her after her husband's death, claiming to need money for a medical procedure. My cousin shared that Dad had tried to get him to invest in a foolproof business opportunity that turned out to be nothing but empty promises. A pattern emerged. Dad targeted family members at their most vulnerable, used emotional manipulation to extract money, then disappeared again. He wasn't just an absent father. He was a predator who saw family bonds as exploitation opportunities. With Elena's help, I drafted a document detailing Dad's legal obligations, including the unpaid child support with accrued interest. I also created a fake inheritance overview suggesting Mom had left a modest but significant sum, carefully worded to imply money without explicitly stating it. This would be the bait to ensure Dad showed up for our meeting. I texted him. I've had time to think about our family situation. Mom's attorney wants to meet with both of us about her estate. Thursday, 2 p.m., Rodriguez Law Offices. I included the address. His response was immediate. Great news. Looking forward to resolving this as family. See you Thursday. Marcus and I role-played different scenarios, preparing for Dad's likely manipulation tactics. Elena warned that men like my father often resort to anger or victim playing when confronted. Stay calm and factual, she advised. Document everything. If he makes threats, we'll have witnesses. I also took a precautionary step that felt necessary but difficult. I contacted Tiffany directly, sharing some of what I'd learned about Dad's pattern of behavior. I'm not trying to interfere in your marriage, I wrote, but you should know he's told your parents I'm dead, and he's currently trying to extract money from me by making claims against my recently deceased mother's estate. Please be careful. She didn't respond, but I'd done what I could to warn her. The night before the meeting, I visited Mom's grave, bringing her favorite daisies. I sat beside her headstone in the quiet cemetery, the setting sun casting long shadows across the grass. I'm confronting Dad tomorrow, I said aloud, feeling only slightly foolish for talking to a headstone. Not for revenge, but for closure. For both of us. I wish you were here to tell me if I'm doing the right thing. As if in answer, a gentle breeze stirred the flowers I'd placed. I remembered Mom's last request for me to find forgiveness. I wasn't sure that was possible, but perhaps I could find peace. That night, I met with my therapist for an emergency session, processing my emotions and preparing for what would likely be an intense confrontation. Remember, Rachel, she said as our session ended, closure doesn't depend on his response or acknowledgement. Closure comes from you speaking your truth, regardless of how he receives it. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully in a professional outfit that made me feel confident and protected. I gathered all my documentation, including copies of Dad's unpaid child support records, evidence of his past schemes, and a photo of Mom and me at my college graduation, a milestone he should have witnessed. Marcus hugged me tightly before I left. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. Whatever happens, remember who you are and what you've built without him. I arrived at Elena's office 30 minutes early, reviewing our strategy one last time. The receptionist informed me that my father had already arrived and was waiting in the conference room. Are you ready? Elena asked, her kind eyes assessing my emotional state. I took a deep breath, thinking of Mom's strength, of the life I'd built, of the truth I deserved to speak after 14 years of silence. I'm ready. Dad was sitting at the polished conference table when I entered, his expression lighting up at the sight of me. He wore a different suit than at the funeral, but I noticed the same knockoff watch. Elena followed me in, introducing herself professionally. Miss Rodriguez is Mom's estate attorney, I explained, taking a seat across from him rather than beside him. Dad's smile widened. Excellent. I appreciate you arranging this, Rachel. Family should work together during difficult times. Elena placed a folder on the table. Before we discuss Sarah Mitchell's estate, there's a matter of outstanding obligations that needs addressing. Dad's smile faltered slightly. Obligations? I opened my own folder and slid a document across the table. This is a complete accounting of the child support you failed to pay from 2008 to 2011, when I turned 21. With statutorily mandated interest, the amount is now $64,723. The color drained from his face as he scanned the document. This is ridiculous. The divorce was years ago. There's a statute of limitations on these things. Actually, Elena interjected smoothly, in this state, there is no statute of limitations on unpaid child support. The debt remains legally collectible indefinitely. Dad's expression hardened as he pushed the paper away. I didn't come here to discuss ancient history. I came to talk about Sarah's estate and what provisions she might have made for me. I took out another document, Mom's will, and placed it before him. Mom left no provisions for you. She did, however, leave detailed records of how your abandonment affected us financially and emotionally. Abandonment is a strong word, he protested. What would you call disappearing for 14 years without a word? I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. What would you call telling your current wife's parents that I died in a car accident? His eyes widened in genuine shock. How did you? I've been doing research, I continued. I've spoken with other family members you've approached for money over the years. I've found the lawsuit your former in-laws filed against you. I know about the rental properties you've skipped out on, the business ventures that never materialized. Dad's charming facade cracked completely. You don't understand my situation. I've had bad luck, that's all. Bad luck doesn't explain lying about your daughter being dead, I countered. Bad luck doesn't explain approaching me at my mother's funeral with your hand out after 14 years of complete silence. He leaned forward, voice lowering. Look, Rachel, I admit I've made mistakes, but I'm still your father. Blood means something. Blood meant nothing when Mom was working double shifts to put me through community college because you took off with your girlfriend. Blood meant nothing all those birthdays and Christmases you couldn't be bothered to call. Blood meant nothing when Mom was dying of cancer and we were drowning in medical bills. Dad shifted tactics, his expression softening to one of contrition. I regret those choices every day, Princess. I truly do. But I'm here now, trying to make amends. Don't you think your mother would want you to forgive me? To help me when I need it? The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. Don't you dare tell me what my mother would want. You didn't know her anymore. You chose not to. I pulled out the final document, a formal acknowledgement, stating he had no claims on Mom's estate and would cease all attempts to extract money from me. Here's what's going to happen, I said, sliding a pen toward him. You're going to sign this acknowledgement that you have no legal claim to any part of Mom's estate. You're going to leave town and never contact me again. In return, I won't pursue legal action for the unpaid child support or alert any authorities to your various financial schemes. His face flushed with anger. This is extortion. This is mercy, I corrected. Mom kept records of everything but chose not to pursue collection because she wanted me to have peace. I'm extending you the same courtesy once. But if you ever approach me or my family again, if you ever try to use our relationship to get money, I will pursue every legal avenue available to me, and I will contact every relative and in-law you might target next. Dad stared at the document, calculations visibly running behind his eyes. And if I don't sign? Elena opened another folder. Then I have paperwork prepared to initiate proceedings for the unpaid child support, plus a restraining order application based on harassment. Your choice, Mr. Mitchell. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Dad picked up the pen. His signature was angry, the pen pressing so hard it nearly tore the paper. You're just like your mother, he said, the words intended as an insult, cold and unforgiving. I smiled. Thank you. That's the nicest thing you could have said to me. He stood abruptly. We're done here. Don't worry. I won't bother you again. There's clearly nothing for me here. There never was, I replied quietly. Not money, anyway. Just a daughter who needed a father. Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps genuine regret, perhaps just frustration at a failed con. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. Dad left without another word, the conference room door closing firmly behind him. I sat in silence for a moment, the emotional weight of the confrontation washing over me. It hadn't gone exactly as planned. I'd hoped for some genuine remorse, some acknowledgement of the pain he'd caused, but it had accomplished what I needed. I had stood up to him. I had protected myself and honored Mom's memory. Are you okay? Elena asked gently. I think I will be, I answered honestly. That evening, Marcus organized a small gathering of our closest friends, the family we had chosen. We shared a meal, told stories about Mom, and celebrated the strength she had passed on to me. As everyone was leaving, I found a small envelope that had been slipped under our front door. Inside was a handwritten note from Tiffany. I'm sorry for your loss. I didn't know the truth about you or your mother. Thank you for the warning. I'm going back to my parents. At least one person had been spared my father's manipulations. The next day, I visited Mom's grave again. The cemetery was peaceful in the morning light, birds singing in the nearby trees. I placed fresh flowers and sat on the small bench facing her headstone. It's done, Mom, I said softly. He's gone, hopefully for good this time. As I sat there, I noticed an envelope tucked into the flower holder of the headstone. Curious, I opened it to find a letter in Mom's handwriting, dated just weeks before her death, with instructions for the funeral director to place it here after the service. My dearest Rachel, it began, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and knowing you, you've come to talk to me anyway. Her words brought both laughter and tears. The letter continued. I have a feeling your father might reappear when I'm gone. Men like him have a radar for vulnerability and opportunity. If he has, and if you've had to face him, I want you to know I'm proud of you for whatever choice you made, whether forgiveness or self-protection. You have always been stronger than you knew, and wiser than your years. The real inheritance I leave you isn't money or property. It's the knowledge that you are whole and complete on your own. You were never defined by his absence or even by my presence. You defined yourself through your choices, your resilience, your capacity to love despite having been hurt. Build your life forward, not backward. Choose joy over bitterness, and know that wherever I am cheering you on with all my heart. I clutched the letter to my chest, overwhelmed by her final gift to me, permission to move forward unencumbered by the past. 6 months later, Marcus and I received the news we'd been hoping for, a positive pregnancy test. As I looked at those 2 pink lines, I placed a hand on my still flat stomach and made a silent promise to my unborn child. You will always know you are loved, unconditionally and completely. You will never question your worth or your place in this family. In honor of Mom, we established a nursing scholarship in her name at the hospital where she had worked for decades. The Sarah Mitchell Memorial Scholarship would help single parents pursuing nursing education, turning our family's pain into someone else's opportunity. Dad never contacted me again. Sometimes I wonder if he found his way back to Tiffany, or if he moved on to another target. But those thoughts come less frequently now, replaced by anticipation of the family. Marcus and I are building a family defined not by blood alone, but by choice, commitment, and unwavering presence. The inheritance my mother left wasn't in a bank account or property deed. It was in showing me what true strength looks like, what family should be, how to stand tall in the face of abandonment and build something beautiful from the ashes of disappointment. And that is an inheritance no one can take away. If this story of confronting a toxic family member resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing. I'd love to know in the comments if you've ever had to stand up to someone who tried to take advantage of your kindness or vulnerability. What did you learn from that experience? Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. And I'm grateful for this community that allows us to share these difficult stories. Thank you for listening to mine. And remember, you're stronger than you know. See you in the next video.